Welcome to Boomcast, the official podcast from boombox.io.
I'm MusicByLukas.
And I'm Fabio from Noize London.
Store, organize, and collaborate like never before. Boombox.io is the new home of collaboration.
Also, don't forget that boombox.io is giving away $500 worth of studio equipment every single month. So remember to comment down below with
what myth have you heard about music production? And also, what are some myths that you might believe are true? I'm curious to know what you guys think, because this whole episode, we are going to be talking about, is it myth or is it a fact? Some of the most common thoughts or beliefs about music producers, and we're going to give our thoughts.
So Lucas, what is the first myth that we're going to be debunking today?
I think one of the biggest ones is that you have to be from a certain city or a certain country to make it. I think a lot of people feel like that. And to me, I'm going to go with thinking this one. Well, first, I want to ask you, do you think it's a myth or do you think it's a fact?
Look, I think you can do everything from the internet these days. I definitely think there is so much potential with the thing that we use the most, which I always talk about as the most underrated tool that we have in our studio, in our lives, which is, of course, the mobile phone. Do I think that there is value in being surrounded by the physical aspect? Absolutely, because going to shows, meeting with people face to face, it does give a certain level of dedication, but that doesn't mean that you can't create relationships on top of that through Instagram, social media, Facebook, whatever platform it is that you prefer to use.
Right. I agree because, yeah, going somewhere like, for example, ADE can make a big difference. Like being there in person can be big, but also at the same time, I've had a lot of people say that they want to, for example, move to Amsterdam to become a DJ at like a local club or something like that. And that could actually be more difficult than trying to become a local DJ maybe in a local city because of the fact that there's so much competition and you really have to stand out or really have to be someone big on social media or really have to have some sort of big connection. And, you know, even if you do, the only thing is, you know, you're putting yourself at a level where people are comparing you to the biggest because the biggest play at those clubs all the time. So then it's even harder to be even taken more seriously in a way, not to say it can't happen, but it's a little bit different. So, you know, you could still become a local DJ at a place that's more in your area. Or if you're from a place where, for example, there is no, you know, clubs, they don't listen to your style of music, because I hear this one a lot too. People are like, hey, they don't listen to EDM in my country, or they don't listen to whatever style, you know, you produce or you're working on in the music industry. The thing is, that's where you really want to focus on the online game. Because you can be doing mashups, for example, if you're a DJ on, and we're just talking about DJs, but this is also for producers too, but you could be doing mashups on, you know, Instagram, you could be doing, you know, remixes, you could be doing, showing your music like that, and it could do so well through those platforms that you can get flown out to any city. You can travel to any city, you can put on your own tour. So to me, I think the whole point about, you know, you have to be from a certain city or a certain country is kind of an old school thought. It's not necessarily a myth, but I would say it's mostly a myth, and that it's an older school thought before the internet and before social media was so prevalent, because there was a time, and I think you'd agree, back in the day, like if you were trying to make it in the, I don't know, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, that it was definitely more difficult if you weren't in the city where it was happening, unless you were going to go out on tour or something.
Yeah, Lucas, I agree with you. I think the obstacle is only as big as you make it out to be. And as creatives, we also have to be creative about the way we approach networking. And with all these modern tools at our hands, it seems like a shame to pocket and only have one method in order to be able to network. So maybe you are better face to face, in which case, you know thyself. If you're better face to face, then yeah, going to a city where there's more opportunity to connect with people one-to-one might be better for you. But if you're slightly shy, more introverted, of course, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Maybe social media, messaging, emailing is a better form of contact with you until you feel confident enough to meet with other people in person.
So what myth or fact Well, so would you say it's mostly myth then about the last one?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think each one
Yeah.
has their strengths and it depends on the individual. I would say that one is not necessarily better than the other. It's about trying to use both to your advantage, but also knowing what you're better at. Triple down on your strengths rather than focusing on your weaknesses.
Make sure to comment below which country you're from, which city you're from, and if you think it's a myth or a fact. And Fabio, what do you got for us next? What do you think?
So I'm going to go with you need third-party plugins to make great sounding music. What do you think, Lucas?
Oh, man. So this is interesting because you see those YouTube videos all the time where people do like, I made this with only stock plugins and it sounds super sick. So it is possible to do it. But at the same time, there's so much more opportunity, I feel like, if you do have third-party plugins to a certain extent, because of the fact that, you can maybe have like a certain edge, or you can have, and Logic and these other these other DAWs are pretty often trying to integrate those third-party plugins into their platforms. They're trying to buy out different plugin companies and bring them, because they know how powerful it is, some of these third-party plugins. But yeah, at the same time, I feel like there's just some that just make the process so much easier. But you also are, you don't need a million plugins, I would say, as well. And I think you'd agree with that, because so many of us get addicted to just getting the latest plugin, or, let's say it's like holiday sales and you go out and buy like huge bundles and then you just never use them. I'm sure you also have tons of plugins on there that you never use. So yeah, it's kind of like, you don't need a million third-party plugins, but I think having some is helpful. What do you think?
There's definitely this all the gear and no idea situation that I see a lot of people put themselves in, especially if they have loose ends and they end up buying every single third-party plugin or analog gear they can, and then they kind of feel paralyzed creatively paralyzed and not able to make anything because there's too much choice. So if you do purchase a third-party plugin or piece of analog gear, whatever it may be that you're into, just make sure you spend some time with it, learning it, and really start to understand what it's good at and what it isn't, and what you prefer to use it for. Some things will be better at bass, some things will be better at pads, and definitely getting tools which are more workhorse tools in the beginning. So a synthesizer or a effects processing plugin that does more than one thing can be really beneficial to you, because it prevents you from having to buy specialized pieces of equipment. I would say you can do everything with stock plugins. However, if it inspires you to go into the studio and to want to work, and you're excited to be there because of a new piece of software, that's just as valuable, or hardware, that's just as valuable as just having the piece of gear itself.
And this is just a question for you, which DAW do you think has the best? And this could also be for the audience too, who's watching. Which DAW do you think has the best stock plugins?
Okay, well, I only know Logic and Ableton. I think Logic has better virtual instruments, but I do prefer the mixing plugins in Ableton due to the simplicity. And I'm a big fan of simple plugins, so you can get things done quickly rather than having to complicate the process. What about you, Lucas?
Same thing. I only really have most of my experience, not even with Ableton, but mainly with Logic. But I see a lot of people doing the stock plugin videos where they're making tracks only with stock plugins with FL Studio. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think this would be a good one for everyone to comment below. What's your experience with stock plugins on your DAW? And do you think that they're good enough, or have you really had to like push a lot outside of your DAW's plugin library to be able to make the music that you feel, confident about? It's funny, they're kind of in between, but if you had to choose one, I think that it's a myth that you can't make a quality track with stock plugins. I think that's my verdict, because I think it's possible.
I would say it's a myth. 100%. It's about using what you have rather than about yearning for what you don't. Too much choice. Too much choice will paralyze your creativity. So just be aware of that.
I kind of feel like it's already a myth, but you'll have to let me know what you feel about this. But you have to be a certain age to make it in the music industry. And I think that this one gets to be even more a myth for me when I hear people say something like, is 22 too old to make it? Or is 25 too old to make it? And I get these, it sounds silly to us because we're obviously older than that, but I get these questions all the time. People message me and say, I'm 23, I feel like I'm too old now. And it's like, I think you can see that people have made it from all different ages, but maybe it's more difficult because of the fact that most of the people who I guess are in the beginning of the spotlight or whatever are younger. So maybe that's why people feel that way, or maybe they feel that way because they've been stuck in like, they've had to get a regular job or something because they're getting older, and that kind of like makes them feel like they haven't made it or whatever, and gives them that fatigue. What do you think?
I love the question. I love this idea of the myth that you have to be a certain age. I think what people look at it as some sort of equation, like I have to be this age, or if I'm too old, or if I'm 40, 50, 60, I still can't make it. It's not about what age, it's about how much time you're putting in, right? I do believe that there's a 10,000 hours approach to any skill in life, any vocation. And that's what you should be aiming towards. If you happen to start at 22, hey, you happen to start at 22. From my personal experience, I actually made it at 18, 19. I got signed to Warner's, and I've been working quite a lot since I was 14. But by the time I was 21, I got dropped and I had to start from scratch again. And it was only when I was like 28, 29, so another 7, 8 years later, that I started making it again. So the progress is not linear. Don't worry about the age, because you might become successful. You might have this shining moment, and then it might be taken away from you. And that's just the nature of the beast.
It's all part of the journey. That's a good point. And also, it depends on too what people's definition of a success is. Because I know there's a lot of people out there that, everyone's different. Like some people want to be on stage. Some people want to be behind the scenes. Some people want to, just do it for hobbies, or they want to be an engineer. They don't want any, social media. They don't want, you know what I mean? Like there's different styles. But yeah, we're seeing people, especially now with so many different social platforms like TikTok and other ones out there, that are doing cool stuff. I recently just saw someone who was just crushing it on TikTok with views, making hip hop beats. And the whole premise was that you wouldn't expect someone of their age to be making these beats. And they were like 67. And they were like, you would never guess that a 67-year-old made this, edgy new beat or whatever. And so they use it to their advantage. And I think that's also something cool. But yeah, you could be making tracks all like, we don't know what our future is. You look at people like the Rolling Stones that are like, obviously they made it younger, but you look at them and they probably thought they were going to be retired by now, not doing music anymore. And they're coming out with new, like all these bands, like as they get older, you look at people like Tiesto and these other DJs. And then I even look at the acting industry, and this one's really interesting because the ones that are like the heartthrobs, like certain actors, like let's say it's like Hugh Jackman or Christian Bale or these different actors, they and actresses, they are like in their 50s and they're like heartthrobs. And there's just like, I feel like it's just, if you kind of let that go and you embrace the confidence. Maybe it's different for us because we're a little bit younger anyways overall, and maybe our perspective's a little skewed, but I'm going to say it's a myth. I'm going to say that, especially as we look to the future, the age is not is going to be more and more of an irrelevant factor.
Meryl Streep, if you're watching this, call me. I think and just enjoy the process. Don't put an age, don't put a number. Okay, I got another one more on the production engineering side of things. The myth is, maybe it's like more of an approach than a myth, but let's call it a myth, is you can fix it in the mix.
Yeah. What do you think right away off the top of your head? To me that, you definitely can't fix it in the master always. So in the mix makes more sense.
So I think there's two sides to this again. So I think there's the approach that people are like, oh, well, it doesn't sound good now. Once the track has been mixed, it will be better. Which I think is yes and no. Okay. So there's two sides to this. One, your production should be as good as possible, and a good production will always be a great mix. In fact, you probably won't even have to mix it that much. However, obviously some of us just don't have super high quality gear, right? And I'm not saying you need high quality gear, but if you have a great sounding drum, a great sounding mic, and let's say a good vocalist, it's obviously going to sound better than if you use a very cheap mic and a really reflective room.
Right.
And so in those scenarios, and I've had to deal with, engineering or working in those kind of situations, you do have to bear in mind like that later on in the process, you're going to have to fix it in the mix. It doesn't mean that that's what you should depend on, but I also think it's actually one of the reasons why we have so many plugins that are like restoration plugins, shall we call them, right? And I think that's because our signal, the root of our sound, isn't as high quality as it has been in the past, and so we have more tools to help us get to that professional level without needing to spend a silly amount of money renting a studio or buying studio gear.
It's a really good point though, because a really good song will sound a lot of times amazing, whether it's like super mixed or not. But that could also have to do sometimes with it's difficult to say, because some producers are different, right? So for example, I like to produce with a lot less tracks than the average producer. So I will have like maybe 50 tracks in a session. Maybe at the most it'll get to like 75 or more. But I have seen and have been in the studio with producers that do 200 to 300 tracks, especially with some of the like more crazy out there genres with all the effects and ear candy and like tons of layers and warping sounds and just all this stuff. And I would feel like those would be a little bit harder to sound good when they're not mixed. Whereas, like a simplistic track, a minimal house or a some kind of chill house track or something like that could sound great. And it would just only really be enhanced with the mix, you would feel, in comparison. And now it's time for our out of the box segment, where we are going to ask a question that's completely off topic. And also, we want to shout out again boombox.io. If you haven't checked it out, go sign up for your free account. It is the home of collaboration. There is so much sick stuff on there. You don't need Dropbox anymore. You don't need Google Drive. Try it for free. You're going to love it. So the out of the box question for today is, Fabio, and everyone at home, actually, this would be interesting too. But if you had to host a podcast, or if you had to do a podcast that has nothing to do with music, marketing, or like music industry or business, like what would it be about?
Okay, I think
what would you enjoy?
You know me quite well, so I think like this doesn't come as a surprise to you, but I would love to do a podcast on dopamine. So on understanding the human brain and what triggers dopamine release and why, and how to actually control that in order to be disciplined, in order to be able to feel productive, in order not to be able to get addicted to things or fall into bad habits. I feel like as a musician, I've had to be very, very disciplined throughout my life to get to where I am today. And that's not to say that I don't fall off the map every so often and lose routine. But I am obsessed with things in my lifestyle, like sauna, cold showers, sugar intake, exercise, as well as also things like novelty, socializing, all these different aspects that I think make me as productive as possible. I'm not saying that I'm superhuman by any means, but there's definitely so much to it.
We are all saying that.
What about you, Lucas?
I think I like yours, and it makes perfect sense for you. I thought you were going to say something around fitness, but you expanded way beyond that, so that's super cool. Mine, I think, would have to do probably with either travel, lifestyle, just like kind of probably just fun. Also, like maybe like inviting people on that would talk about very interesting topics, like inviting someone on, like, I don't know, like a Neil deGrasse Tyson or someone that would talk about the universe, or like, just like big questions. Could be fun just to like have and be chill about it. A lot of people ask this question. I'm curious to know what you think about it, Fabio. So this one is, do you have to go to music school to be successful in the music industry? I get a lot of people that say, I never went to music school. So, what am I going to do?
It's funny because it kind of plays into what I was just talking about with my podcast. School is about discipline. If you are someone who is undisciplined, you need to go to class. You need to be accountable for your actions, right? Oh, sorry, you need someone else to hold you accountable for your actions. Then go to music school. Why not? Do you know what I mean? Like, also, you're gonna meet some awesome people there who you're gonna be able to network with. However, if you feel like maybe you don't have the cash to go, you don't have the resources to go, that doesn't mean that you're not going to be a successful producer or musician or engineer. There is so much free information out there. Yes, you have to sort through it and you have to decide what is worth watching, but I think be careful of ingesting too much free information all the time. It is worth paying also for courses which have been carefully sequenced for your learning, and treat that as a school. Treat that as your university. So the answer is yes and no. Yes, go to a university, go to a college and academy if you're like, I need to be at this place every day at 9 a.m. or whatever it is. Otherwise, I'm not going to get anything done. On the other hand, if you are very self-sufficient or looking to learn to be more self-sufficient, go teach yourself, because you'll have so much fun in the process. And ultimately, I think what the perfect combination of the two is teaching yourself, paying for some education, but collaborating. So much learning happens through collaboration, whether that person is better than you or not. Everyone has a different method to making music, and sitting in the studio with someone that you might learn just one or two things that change your workflow or your perception on how to make music or engineer whatever it is that you're doing together, and you're going to add that to your toolkit.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And this one in particular is really a tough one for me because of the fact that I have my own music, online academy. And the reason why I started that and the reason why we built that is because we didn't really like what was out there. Especially coming from the US, I know that some of the areas like in Amsterdam and London, they have some more because again, I'm coming from the electronic dance music area, but they have some more schools that are more specified in those areas in some of the other places. But in the US, it is tough to find a college or a school that's not going to just teach you, how to be an audio engineer, and not even just how to be an audio engineer in a specific genre, but old school audio engineering, learning, Pro Tools and being in a studio and moving around knobs. And some of that information is important, but obviously depending on what you're going into. But at the same time too, the one thing that most music schools, even the EDM focused music schools or the ones that are genre specific, they don't teach you is how to grow on social media, how to market your music, all the kind of business side. And I think what happens is then a lot of producers start to feel that's not a part of it. And I think that that's really important that is also there from the beginning. I think a lot of people think they have to get good at the music first and then they do socials. And it's no, it's part of the journey. And you want to have people along with the ride so that they know why they should believe in you when you do make it, when you are really quality, because of the fact that they saw you get there and they care and they're part of that journey and they have that passion for you. If you show up all of a sudden on day one and you're just like this, you're acting like you're the coolest thing in the world, that's a tough problem to have because a lot of people don't know why they should care. And that's a really important factor. But also, you were talking about that 10,000 hours thing. It takes a long time to get good at social media too. It's its own skill. You can't just hire someone to there's a certain aspect, but I love what you said about how you kind of have to have both. But anyways, that's why with what I'm doing with Team MBL Online Academy, we do everything. And another big thing about music schools, I feel, is that they don't always have the most current information with how the industry works, because a lot of curriculum takes years to get approved. And a lot of times schools don't upgrade curriculums because of the fact that it costs a lot of money. And I'm talking about books, I'm talking about online courses, all that kind of stuff. So there's still using stuff that's 10 years old. And a lot of teachers are people who are retired or who, were around before TikTok was so important or Instagram, and they're not living it. And so to me, that's also a thing where, I think there's a balance. So if you're going to, I guess I would say, if you're going to music school, for example, to learn how to play, if you're a pianist and you want to learn how to play piano better, that could be really good. If you are an audio engineer and you want to go to audio engineering school, that could be also very helpful. If you need that discipline like you talked about, or you want to be surrounded by those kind of people in person, that could be helpful. But I do think I would say it's mostly a myth. I'm curious to know if anyone watching went to music school or what their experience was. I've heard people have really good experiences, but I definitely don't think it's the secret to being successful in the music industry.
It's definitely not going to be a disadvantage. I'll say that much, but don't think that it's the only way,
Maybe to your wallet.
I was
depending on where you go.
I was a teacher at an academy, and one of the cool things about that academy is that they only hired teachers who were established in the music industry. So that was really cool. And we got to write our own courses. Cool. And so we were able to update the curriculum
every 3
months. Yeah. And it was great because it just meant it was relevant. Be wary of getting a certificate. And be like, I have my certificate of music production. No one cares. You know what I mean? As in, from a big establishment.
That's a good point.
What people want to see, exactly what you're talking about. They want to see your journey, especially through social media. So, and I think that's what Team MBL brings, and that's why there's so much value in what you do, because you're taking people from the beginning all the way. Let's not call it the end, right? but all the way to where they
Sure,
need to be,
sure.
because there's no such thing as the end in this.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and it's a good point. Like Spotify is never going to ask for you to upload your certificate before you can distribute your music. You want to submit to this editorial? Hey, did you go to Berkeley?
I've got one more because I think you'll like this one. So the myth is you have to be inspired or feel inspired to make music.
This is interesting because inspiration works on both ways, right? Because you hear people talk about how they went through a breakup, so they wrote this one song, or they were going through a really hard time, so they wrote this one song, or they were really happy or inspired. And a lot of artists who everyone knows, like their albums are even like themed around those times in their life because they're all like inspired by those moments. It's interesting point because, yeah, do you have to be constantly inspired? And also, do you have to then chase that inspiration?
Yeah, or do you have to actually just force yourself to sit down and make music because you're being too like, ooh, I'm so creative and I need like,
right.
You know what I mean? I'm like, I need.
Well, they do say motivation. There's like a creation brings motivation, brings inspiration. It's like a flow. And so basically they're saying like, if you sit yourself in front of the computer, I heard someone talking about this, I forget where, but if you sit yourself in front of your DAW or let's say you just play guitar, or I don't know, if whatever you do, you're a singer, if you put yourself in that position more often where you are creating, you're not always going to get stuff, but inspiration can come. Like I'm sure you've had this happen before where, you know, you're not necessarily in the mood, but like 5 or 10 minutes in, something kind of like you start playing a note or something or you hear a sample and you're like, oh, and then you're like 2 hours in and you're like, hey, where'd that come from?
And then it's more like 6 hours later and I'm like, where am I? How long have I been here? Yeah. I call it the techno hole. Where I'm like, okay, I gotta make some music or whatever, and then I do not move for so long until I need to run to the bathroom because that's how long I've been holding it in for. But
I love that.
Yeah, look, a lot of myths, a lot of debunking going on today. I think ultimately it's, you know, take everything with a handful of salt and figure it out for yourself. There's not one way for everybody, so it's about what works best for you. Weigh up your options and just consider your process and don't be too hard on yourself as well. It's about experimentation. Trying something and it not working out is better than not trying it, because you need to learn from those mistakes and take them with you and carry your experiences forward. It's going to make you a better all-round musician and you know and help with your evolution and progression as a in the industry.
I love that. Well said. Hear.
Thanks everyone for joining. Don't forget, we'd love to know if you think any of these myths are true, whether you feel that they were debunked, or if you have any other myths that you want to share and want debunked in the comment section down below. Don't forget that we are building a community here. We're all trying to comment on each other's replies and posts. So get in there and let us know what you think.
Also, someone who comments is going to win $500. We choose someone every month. Boombox.io is going to give someone every month who comments a $500 gift card that you can use to get studio gear, plugins, or whatever you want to do.
Don't forget that you can get in touch with either of us and check our individual pages out in the link in the description below. I'm at Noize_London.
I'm at MusicByLukas, and at Boombox.io is also on all socials, and you can go get your free account right now at Boombox.io. All right, see you soon. See you next time. Bye.